of the Constitution. Framing of the Constitution. Introduction. The task of framing of the Constitution was a difficult one. The population of India was heterogeneous with different races, languages, religions, etc., which had to be brought under a single framework of a constitution. Further, the Constituent Assembly had to provide for the achievement of many goals. To start with, there was the objective of social revolution. The theme of social revolution is found in all the proceedings and documents of the Assembly. It led to the adoption of parliamentary government, fundamental rights, and the directive principles. Competing with the objective of social revolutions were the goals of national unity and stability. The goal of domestic stability finds expression in the unique federal structure and the emergency provisions. Similarly, several other aims such as protection of minority interests, national security, etc., had to be accommodated in shaping the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly had to mould a political system flexible enough to bring together all these factors and various entities like provinces, princely states, etc., with differing political background and economic conditions. The Constituent Assembly gave to the people a constitution that expressed the aspirations of the nation. It skillfully selected and modified the principles, procedures, forms of governmental organization which is borrowed from constitutions. It worked through several committees. It effectively applied the methods of consensus and accommodation to arrive at an unanimously approved constitution. Political circumstances in which the Constituent Assembly of India framed the Constitution had a lot of impact on the Constitution itself. The partition of India and Pakistan over Kashmir, the problem of integration of the princely states, reorganization of provinces, the peasant revolt in Telangana, and widespread economic crisis were some of the significant political factors. The framers were also aware of the need to give substantial power to the Union government to deal with threats to unity and stability of the country. This resulted in the emergency provisions. Another important political factor influencing the making of the Constitution was the political stand of the national leaders during the freedom struggle. They had convinced the people that all their problems and miseries were caused by the British rule. Hence, the Assembly was responsible to make a constitution favorable to socio-economic changes. At the same time, all the leaders were committed to liberal democratic approach so that a parliamentary system capable of establishing a welfare state had to be established. The Indian National Congress itself was heterogenic in character. It included numerous as well as opposing groups. This represented the social, political, and economic diversity of India. To make the constitution acceptable to all, there was the need to reconcile and compromise different political and constitutional and governmental principles and systems. The Constituent Assembly therefore adopted the method of selection, modification, accommodation, and consensus. The Constituent Assembly of India was representative of many different groups and ideologies. Among the most important ideological groups represented in the Assembly were the Socialists, the Gandhians, and the Rightists. The Socialists in the Assembly were divided over the two categories of socialism. There were a few Marxian socialists who advocated revolutionary reconstruction of society. A large number of socialists were democratic socialists who who advocated peaceful and parliamentary methods to transform the society. It was mainly Sardar Patel's conservative influence that worked as a restraint. Sardar Patel was considered as the leader of the rightist members in the Constituent Assembly. They supported the interests of the capitalist and landed classes. They advocated private enterprise and the right to private ownership of property. Controversy arose on the issue of incorporation of the fundamental rights to property. Patel stood for it, and he was supported by the rightist members and the distinguished lawyers who were framing the constitution. The Gandhian group opposed the capitalist system. They wanted the revival and promotion of village and small-scale industries. They favored the labor-intensive methods of production. They were for making the rural communities self-sufficient. Politically, they recommended decentralization, democracy based on village panchayats. The Constitution of India was drafted after ransacking all the known constitutions of the world. Many sources were utilized to make the Indian Constitution. Certain features were drawn from the constitutions of USA, Australia, Britain, and Canada. The Act of 1935 was an important source of the new constitution. Though it was criticized as an imitation of the West and a patch, the Constitution of India reflects the knowledge and the wisdom of the framers as well as the aspirations of the people of independent India. The Constitution was framed keeping in view the nature of peculiar conditions of the land and the people of India. The draft constitution was published in January 1948. The Constituent Assembly thoroughly discussed the draft from November 1948 to October 1949. It may be noted that the Constituent Assembly for 2 years was 11 months and 18 days in total. It completed the making of the Constitution in 11 sessions. The new Constitution of India was adopted on 26 November 1949. It came into force on 26 January 1950, which was the 20th anniversary of the day on which the Indian National Congress adopted the resolution on Purna Swaraj, that means complete independence. This day has ever since become the Republic Day of India. Initially, there was some doubt about the status of the Constituent Assembly, but with the passing of the Indian Independence Act, India became a sovereign nation and the Constituent Assembly was made a statutory sovereign body under the Act. During this period, it acted as a dual capacity. First, as the Constituent Assembly engaged in the making of the Indian Constitution, and secondly as the Parliament of India. It remained involved in legislating for the whole India. It was in the exercise of its own supreme authority that the Assembly enacted, ordained and adopted the Constitution of India. Evolution. Criticisms pertaining to the nature of the Constituent Assembly. These remain silenced by the inner strength of the august body. Firstly, it has been contended that it was not representative in character as it was not elected directly through a system of universal adult franchise. It may be noted that such an exercise would have been stupendous and the constitution making would have been unduly postponed. In any case, given the political circumstances and spirit of the people then prevailing, elections in any form would have been brought into the assembly the same set of leaders and representatives. Further, the quality of the assembly was no less just because of indirect elections. Secondly, critics have held that it was not a sovereign body, being a creature of the British government. This view is misconceived, for the assembly was sovereign by virtue of the 1947 Act and as it derived from the people all power and authority. Thirdly, It is pointed out that the Assembly was a Congress party dominated body. Perhaps this was true, but as Granville Austin opines, the Constituent Assembly was a one-party body in an essentially one-party country. The Congress was a national organization spread over the length and breadth of the nation and led by great leaders and political stalwarts. It represented every segment of the Indian society. Thus, it is a truism when Austin says the Assembly was the Congress and the Congress was India. Nor did the other political parties and minority communities go unrepresented. Boldly, the communal-oriented comment that it was a Hindu assembly or a body of Hindus or that it represented only one major community in India is unacceptable. The Constituent Assembly of India was representative of all sections of the Indian society, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, SCs, STs, including the women from different communities. Above all, the Constituent Assembly carried out its task of constitution making meticulously, decently, and efficiently. It gifted India with a workable document. So much so that Dr. Ambedkar observed, if things go wrong under the new constitution, the reason will not be that we had a bad constitution. What we will have to say is that man is vile. In appreciation of the endeavor of the assembly, we may agree with Dr. Rajendra Prasad when he said in his final address, I desire to congratulate the assembly on accomplishing the task of such tremendous magnitude. It has undoubtedly taken us 3 years to complete this work, but if we consider the work that has been accomplished and the number of days that we have spent in framing this constitution, we have no reason to be sorry for the time spent. We came through several committees, namely 22, most important among them being the drafting committee, with Ambedkar as its chairman and other 7 members drafted the Constitution of India. Adopted the Objectives Resolution containing the major principles to be incorporated in the Constitution, the preamble is also based on this resolution. By the Act of 1947, became a fully sovereign and legislative body, functioned as the interim Parliament of India. Discussed in detail and enacted the Constitution which came into force on 26 January 1950, which is also celebrated as the Republic Day every year. In the making of the Constitution was influenced by aspirations of Indian people, the prevailing political circumstances which required a strong union to hold it all together, ideology of the freedom struggle and the leaders that were involved, Gandhian principles, and the heterogeneity and inequalities of the Indian society, the peculiarities of it, to make the constitution adequate as well as complete as possible was a must need. It borrowed extensively from different constitutions of the world. Thank you.